You just learned that your fire alarm at your building is malfunctioning, and now you need to be on fire watch. As a property manager, you have a decision to make. Do you use your own staff or hire a fire watch company to do the fire watch? It's a pretty big decision that will ultimately affect your staff, the tenants, liability risk, and the budget. I represent Urgent Security and Fire Watch, and we provide fire watch services. So of course, I believe hiring a fire watch company is the best way to do it. However, I must say that there are some cases where using internal staff for fire watch is a viable option. This video will give you the information that you need to decide whether or not you should use your internal staff or hire a fire watch company when your property needs fire watch. If you're watching this video, I'm assuming that you know what fire watch is. However, let's go ahead and define it to make sure that we're all on the same page. Fire watch involves people watching for signs of fire in areas that are affected by a malfunctioning fire alarm or fire sprinkler system. They're like human smoke detectors, for lack of a better term. The first thing to consider when deciding on how to staff your fire watch is what are the regulatory requirements for your location. We got to follow the rules, right? If you're in Washington, D.C., the choice is easy. The fire code in the District of Columbia states that only a licensed security company can provide fire watch services in Washington, D.C. You cannot use your internal staff. So if you're in D.C., pretty much you can't use your internal staff. You got to hire a company. If you're outside of D.C., each city, state, and county has the right to create their own guidelines. However, there are certain things that are pretty much uniform regardless of where you're located. Here are the most common fire watch requirements. Fire watch tasks. Anyone doing fire watch patrols cannot do any task other than fire watch while they're on duty for fire watch patrols. If you have an employee assigned to do fire watch, they can't respond to maintenance calls, answer phones, work the concierge desk, or any other tasks that are not directly related to their fire watch duties. This is required primarily due to safety concerns. No one wants a fire watch to miss signs of fire because they're busy manning the concierge desk or responding to a service call. Training is another common requirement. Persons doing fire watch patrols must be properly trained to do fire watch patrols. At a minimum, they need to understand about identifying fire hazards, how to conduct patrols, and most importantly, what do they do if they see signs of fire. Patrol logs is another common thing that must be done. Every patrol must be documented on fire patrol logs. It should always include the person doing the patrols, where they patrol, what areas they patrolled, and what they saw. That's pretty much standard wherever you go. And the fire watch logs must remain on site, ready for inspection. No matter where you're located, you'll pretty much always find a minimum of those three requirements. Now that you know the minimum requirements, let's look at the advantages of using internal staff for fire watch patrols. The first advantage is residents feel more comfortable. Using internal staff for fire watch can make the residents feel more comfortable, especially in high-end properties. Tenants are already uneasy about being in a building with a malfunctioning fire alarm. Combining that with seeing people that they don't know roaming the halls doing fire watch patrols can be stressful. Seeing staff that they already know and are familiar with can result in them feeling more comfortable and at ease about what's going on in your building, which ultimately can affect overall happiness of your tenants. You also have the fact that your internal staff know the building. Your internal staff are already familiar with that building because they're there every day. This can lead to them spotting issues faster and, more importantly, locating exits quicker in case of emergency. There are also possible cost savings. Using internal staff often is better for the budget. Your current staff are already built in your budget. As long as you don't go into overtime, you have no increased costs. You're just using the labor expenses you've already budgeted for one thing for something else. Fire watch can be expensive, In fact, in some cases, even the overtime expense for your own staff is less costly than the hourly rate charged by firewatch companies. These are two pretty significant advantages. Tenant satisfaction is important, and staying within your budget is always a good thing. Let's take a look at the disadvantages of hiring your own staff. First is liability concerns. If your staff is providing the firewatch, your organization is assuming all liability and responsibility for what they do. Most property management insurance policies do not cover liability for firewatch performed by property's internal staff. A few years ago, there was a property in Alexandria, Virginia that used their own maintenance staff to provide firewatch services. Unfortunately, there was a fire, and residents sued the property management company, accusing them of assigning staff that improperly did the firewatch. Usually, your insurance would handle this on behalf of the property owner and management company. In this case, the insurance carrier refused to protect the company because firewatch was outside of the scope of work that was listed within the policy. Firewatch is not a standard part of property management duties. It represents an increased risk for your property. Unfortunately, most insurance companies will not approve to cover risks that are not listed in your policy. It's sad, but true. This leaves management to be fully liable for everything the firewatch does or does not do while they're on duty. Using internal staff can also disrupt operations. Your staff were hired to complete certain tasks. They cannot do those tasks while they are doing firewatch patrols. As a result, the property cannot function as well as usual, and everyone tends to get behind on their core work. It can take an awful long time to catch up on all those missed tasks. There's also safety risks. Internal staff tend to lack firewatch training. Even if they have been trained, they usually cannot compare to a professional. Professional firewatch officers do firewatch patrols every week throughout the year. Your staff may do it once every few years. That lack of experience and familiarity increases the likelihood of mistakes happening. Mistakes in an emergency situation can lead to people being injured. Now that we've talked about everything that's involved with the advantages and disadvantages of using your own internal staff, let's talk about the advantages of hiring a firewatch company. First is liability reduction. Hiring a firewatch company shifts liability for what happens to the firewatch company. Their insurance will defend them and you if there's any legal issues. Any claims fall on their insurance instead of yours. It also can reduce stress. As a property manager, I'm sure your job is stressful enough as it is. The last thing you want to have to do is to add coordinating your staff's firewatch schedule to the list of things that you need to take care of. When you hire a company to do your firewatch, that company is responsible for managing the firewatch officers. This allows you to focus on what you do best, managing the property. You don't have the stress of managing the firewatch shift schedule or auditing the paperwork to make sure the logs are compliant or dealing with those type of issues. The right firewatch company handles all of that so you don't have to. Here's an advantage that most people don't consider: possible cost savings. Most insurance companies will almost never cover the cost of repairs, but they will usually cover the firewatch expense. Having firewatch on duty reduces the likelihood of the building burning down in case of fire. That reduces their risk. I'm not an insurance expert, but I will tell you that in my over 15 years experience managing firewatch projects, I've only seen one situation where an insurance carrier did not cover firewatch expense. And in that case, the building owner had some kind of odd self-insurance situation. I really wasn't familiar with it. It was really unusual. Other than that, one occasion, it has always been covered as long as you have the proper documentation. Keep in mind, most insurance companies will usually cover the cost of hiring a professional firewatch company. They will almost never cover the expense for untrained internal staff doing the firewatch. You also get the benefits of eliminating compliance concerns. A professional firewatch security company knows what it takes to comply with the fire code. In fact, they're responsible because in most cases, the fire marshal will fine the security company for firewatch violations instead of the property owner. As a result, you don't have to worry about if your firewatch is compliant with the code. The firewatch company handles that. As you can see, there are a lot of advantages to hiring a firewatch company. However, there are some definite disadvantages that should be considered. First thing that comes to mind is the high cost. Firewatch is expensive. Hourly rates for firewatch can be as high as $50 to $70 per person per hour. That can add up to thousands of dollars a day for an unplanned, unexpected expense. It can place a serious strain on the budget. There's also nervous or uneasy tenants. Your tenants are already uneasy due to them having to be in a building with an alarm that's out of service. Now they see people that they don't know roaming the halls. This can be an issue, especially in higher end properties. A few months ago, we had an officer working firewatch at a luxury condo in Washington, D.C. A resident saw a firewatch officer walking in the hallway and called the police. They also complained to the property manager. Keep in mind, the officer was clean shaven, in full uniform, and was carrying a clipboard, a two-way radio, and a megaphone to alert the building in case there are fire. Yet, the resident still called the police and complained to the property management company about a stranger in the hallway. Fortunately, the firewatch officer explained the situation to the police along with the property manager, and it became a non-issue. But it was still an uncomfortable situation for the resident, the property manager, and the firewatch officer. You never know what will make someone uneasy. However, we do know that they are a lot less likely to be uneasy seeing someone that they're familiar with, someone that they see in the leasing office all the time or around the building. Let's wrap this up. Should you use your own staff for firewatch? Both options have advantages and disadvantages. Internal staff can save money and feel more familiar with residents, but the liability, training gaps, and compliance risks are serious. Hiring a firewatch company costs more, but it gives you coverage, compliance, and peace of mind. If you're considering using your internal staff, check with your insurance carrier first. Firewatch isn't just about covering shifts. It's about protecting people, property, and your business. If after contacting your insurance company and confirming you're covered for it, you decide to use your own staff, be sure to watch our video with instructions on how to do your own firewatch. Follow the link in the description of this video and it'll show you exactly what you need to do if you want to do it yourself and how to do it in the best way possible and be compliant with the regulations and reduce your liability. Thanks again for joining us. I hope this was helpful. Have an amazing day.